Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to GSD with Tanwa. This is part one, day 10. So again, in part one, we talk about various English communication skills that you will need in order to succeed in academic settings, especially as a university student. So today, we're going to talk about writing skills, the last of the four skills that we are going to talk about in part one. So we have talked about reading skills, listening skills, and what's the other one? Reading, listening, speaking. Right. Reading, listening, and speaking. We have talked about reading, speaking, and listening. So today we're going to talk about writing skills. And the next week, we are going to talk about your writing skills in standardized testing. And then we're going to wrap it up 2 weeks from now. And then we're moving on to part two. So for those of you wondering what part two is going to be like, so part two is going to be the application of whatever the hell you're learning right now in academic settings. So that comes down to how to write your thesis better, how to write your research paper better, how to give a better presentation in academic settings, or how to prepare for a conference, right? Which hopefully would make your life as a graduate student or undergrad student easier when it comes to using English in academic settings. Okay, that's enough chit chat. Let's move on to the content. So, hi to all of my viewers that are watching me right now. So let's start with the first one of the. So remember, when you want to improve a skill of a language, right? We talked about this many times before. You have three aspects that you have to improve at the same time. That is precision, fluidity, and intonation, right? So let's start with the precision of your writing. This is what most of you uh, will worry about the most. This is what I get the most questions on. Usually, students would approach me and say something along the line of, my grammar is not good, so therefore I cannot write well. I would say no. Maybe your grammar is not good. If you don't think your grammar is good, your grammar is probably not good. Okay. But having a good grammar is not the only thing that you have to care about. Right? Having good grammar is not the only thing that you have to care about. In fact, I would say it's one of the last things that you have to care about. If you follow, if you improve your English in an organic manner. So what I mean is this: like you probably have heard of this before. For native English speakers, they don't start learning grammar until probably like middle school or high school, right? So they know how to speak the language first before they move on into grammar. It's the same thing with whatever your native language is. If you speak Thai, you don't start out by learning what a noun is or like what an adjective is. You just kind of speak it. Okay. So that's my approach of how to improve at a language as well. Right? In order to improve your precision in writing, there is no easy way than to use what I call a simple language. Let me show you what I mean. Um, so let's read this sentence together, right? So this sentence says, the complexity of the problem requires consistent perusal and reflection, right? Um, so notice the sentence here, right? And if you are watching right now, please comment whether you think this is a good sentence or not, right? Please comment whether you think this is a good sentence or not. The complexity of the problem requires consistent perusal and reflection. So right off the bat, you notice that this sentence uses big words, like big goddamn words, like consistent, complexity, perusal, reflection, right? All big words. And when I talk to some students, this is what they usually say. They said, I cannot write well because I don't know many words. Right? In fact, I would say, if you're not writing well, you are using too many words. Right? You are using too many words. What I mean is this. When students try to write something in English, they are trying too hard to impress the reader by using big words because they think using big words make them sound more intelligent, right? Make them look good. They just want to look good, impress people, right? Which is stupid. Notice I don't go around the bush and say, oh, that is not advisable. I just say that is stupid, right? That's the number one biggest mistake that I have seen students do. They are trying to use the words that they don't normally use in real life, right? So this whole sentence, the complexity of the problem requires consistent perusal and reflection. If you write it in the kind of English that you usually use, it looks something like this. We need to think about the problem long and hard. Now everyone understands, right? Compare again this one. The complexity of the problem requires consistent perusal and reflection. With this one, we need to think about the problem long and hard, right? Consistent mean long, right? Perusal mean hard thinking, like thinking about the problem a lot. So my first recommendation to improve your precision in writing is this: do not use words that you don't normally use in real life. I don't give a crap if you write a Nobel acceptance speech, if you're winning an Oscar or writing for the president. I don't care. If you don't normally use those words, do not use it in your writing, because you will come across as a fake. And you don't want to do that, right? Being a fake and use big words will reduce the precision of your writing, because you don't actually know how to use the words correctly. Right? And this is not just me saying random ass recommendation, right? Let me show you this movement. Okay. And if you want to follow along with all of these examples, I have it in the video description, whether it's on Facebook or on YouTube. If you want to, again, this is not just my recommendation. There is this movement by the official United States government called plainlanguage.gov, right? Plainlanguage.gov. So what are they trying to do? What are they trying to do is this. They want to create a movement in which plain language, so that's easy, small words are used to make it easier for the public to read and understand government communications. Right? So let me give you an, oh wait, I'm not sharing the screen right now. Hold on, I'm about to share the screen. Give me a second here. Boom, there you go, right? So plainlanguage.gov, okay? So plain language aims to make it easier for the public to read, understand, and use government communications, right? So let me show you an example of what I just said. Do not use big words. Use the words that you know. So here's one example, right? So in the original document, it said, so this is for payment, right? The original document says, we must receive your completed application form on or before the 15th day of the second month following the month you are reporting. If you do not submit your application electronically, or the 25th day of the second month following the month you are reporting, if you submit your application electronically. That is one goddamn sentence. Look at that again. Look at that atrocity. That is one long sentence. And even me, having read that sentence, I still don't understand what you're trying to say, right? So this is an example of a native speaker using words and sentence structures that are too difficult. Nobody would be talking like this in real life. Like nobody would be talking like this. So after the plain language movement, this is what you get. If you submit your form electronically, we must receive it by the 25th of the second month. If you submit your form not electronically, we must receive the form by the 15th of the second month. That's it. That's it. That's the content of that whole sentence, right? That whole sentence came down to this, right? So again, the after version is something that someone would probably actually say it that way, not the before version. So even native speakers have the problem of trying to impress the reader by using big sentence, right? Do not do that. Let me give you another example that is very, very funny to me. Right. So this is about car safety. In the before version, it said this is a multi-purpose passenger vehicle which will handle and maneuver differently from an ordinary passenger car in driving conditions which may occur on streets and highways and off-road. As with other vehicles of this type, if you make sharp turns or abrupt maneuvers, the vehicle may roll over or may go out of control and crash. You should read driving guidelines and instructions in the owner's manual and wear your seat belts at all times, right? So the sentence itself is not too bad. It's just very wordy. This is not something that you would say in real life, right? The other version look like this, right? So this car might tip over. Don't make sharp turn or do not go too fast. Wear your seatbelt and read your manual. Boom, done. Right. So again, even native speakers have the problem of trying to impress your reader by using words or sentence structures that you do not use in real life. Right. Do not do that. Do not ever, ever, ever do that. Okay. So that would be my first recommendation when it comes to the precision of your writing. Write as if you are speaking to the audience, and that's always true. Right. Okay. So the second way not the second way, the second source of inspiration for you to improve your precision is this essay from George Orwell, right? If you don't know who George Orwell is, you are probably young. He's a very old writer, but very famous as well. He's the author of Oh wait, I'm not sharing the screen. There you go. George Orwell, right? So he looks like this, a British. So he is the author of one very famous book in Thailand, and that book is called. I'm probably gonna get in trouble for saying this because Thai government tried really hard to ban it. It's called 1984. 1984. This one. He wrote it in 1949. Fantastic. And Animal Farm, right? So this has gotten very popular in Thailand in the past few years because of the political protests and whatnot. Right. So Animal Farm and 1984. But that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is writing. He has this essay called Politics and the English Language. Right. This essay is a must read for anyone who wants to improve their English writing. You definitely have to read it. It's kind of long, and he goes into the details of like his thought process. But I will save you the trouble of reading through it, because I know you are young and impatient, by giving you the Wikipedia summary of it. Right. So this is Politics and English Language. Again, the link to all of these pages are in the video description. Okay. So let's see what he said. He said in this essay, right? So number one, never use metaphor, simile, or figure of speech, which you see all the time, right? This is usually not going to be a problem for a non-native speaker because you don't have these words in your dictionary yet, right? So I would just skip that one. This second one is the one that we talk about. Never use a long word where a short one will do, right? So going back to the earlier sentence of the complexity of the problem, right? So going back to this sentence, right? So again, never use a long word when a short one will do, right? So for this one, for example, the complexity of the problem requires consistent perusal and reflection. Why use long words when you can just say a hard problem, right, requires continued thinking. Done. A hard problem requires continued thinking. So much easier, right? So never ever use a long word when a short one will do. Because again, when you're trying to write something, your goal is not to appear smart. You're not trying to impress people. Um, your goal should not be trying to appear smart. Your goal should be trying to communicate your study, right? Trying to communicate your point across. And anytime you use a big word, you are excluding a group of readers that might not know the words, right? The only time that you should use a big word is when you are communicating among professionals and experts in the same field, right? That is when you should use all the languages tool that you have. Other than that, keep it simple. Okay. Number 3, if it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. I see this all the time. Right? This is, again, we still harping on the precision of your writing. Okay. So the 4th rule from George Orwell is if you can cut a word out, cut a word out. For example, I have seen students do this. The study of landform is very important. Right? This is in like a paper. The study of landform is very important. So if you can cut a word, always cut it out, right? As long as the meaning does not change. Okay. So obviously you can't cut this thing out, right? Because you're talking about the study of landform. And you are trying to say that the study of landform is important, right? But this one is unneeded, right? The study of landform is important when you put it down in a writing is no different than saying the study of landform is very important. There's no different at all because obviously it is important enough for you to write about it. So you don't need the word very. I even have seen this, like from some of the students, the study of landform is extremely, very important. And then you have to ask yourself at what point does it become ridiculous for you to keep doing that? Like the study of landform is extremely, without a question, very important. Right? You see that each of these sentences basically tells you the same thing. The study of landform is important. Right? So if you can cut a word out, cut a word out, especially adverbs. Right? Number 4, never use passive voices when you can use active voices. This applies mostly to non-academic writing, right? We will talk about this when we talk about the intonation of your writing in a little bit. So hold on tight. Number 5 is basically the same as number 2, right? This is what we talk about. Never use scientific word or jargon when you can use everyday English language word, unless you're talking among experts in the field, right? That is the only exception for this rule. And then rule number 6, this is very important, right? George Orwell said, break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. Right? Basically, don't say stupid shit, right? Break the English language rules, but don't say stupid shit. So that's just him being him, right? That's just him being an author. So anyway, so I would highly recommend you read through this essay because he gives a lot more examples of what not to do when it comes to good writing, right? So George Orwell, politics, and the English language. Look, I mean, the essay is important enough to have its own Wikipedia article, right? It's so important in the development of writers that it has its own Wikipedia entry. How ridiculous is that? I don't even have Wikipedia entry under my name, okay? So if any of you students would like to create a Wikipedia entry of my name, feel free. I'd be happy. Anyway, let's move on. So another tool for improving your precision is, well, actually, I'm gonna keep that for the intonation as well. But let's move on to the fluidity of your writing. Right? So again, precision. Just to recap a little bit. So for precision, never use big words, right? Use small words. Use the kind of English that you have a full control over. Your goal is to communicate, not to impress the reader. Okay. And then go read George Orwell and his 6 suggestions. All right, moving on to fluidity. So again, fluidity refers to the ability for you to communicate fluidly. Right? You don't have to. If it's speaking, then you don't have to stop and go like right, because that's not fluid. When it comes to writing, uh, fluidity means that it is easy for your audience, for your reader, to read and understand your writing, right? So the kind of sentences that you use is not only grammatically correct, but also sounds right, okay? And that's the key word here. It has to sound right. Sounds right, sounding right as in like when you read it out loud, it actually sounds nice, as if somebody is speaking it to you, right? So my first recommendation for fluidity would be to read everything that you write during the editing of your writing. Okay. After you have written something, be it a paper, a thesis, or whatever, right? Sit your ass down, open that shit up, turn off the music. Right? Turn off the music, turn off your YouTube. Just silence everything else and read what you write. Right? If it sounds good to you, great. If it doesn't sound good to you and you feel it's something is weird somewhere, stop and fix that sentence. Right? Stop and fix that sentence. That would be my first recommendation. Let me give you some examples from my students are gonna hate me for this because I'm using their example to show you what not to do. But here I have a sample trying to find one that is like so bad. Okay, give me a second here. All right, I have it up here, but I lost it somewhere. Second. Here, let's do this one instead. Right. Here's an example from a website, which we will talk about in a little bit. So look at this sentence, right? It said Hemingway App. The app highlights lengthy, complex sentences and common errors. If you see a yellow sentence, shortens or split it. Right, that's one sentence. The second sentence, I guess I should make this bigger. The second sentence says, if you see a red highlight, your sentence is so dense and complicated that your readers will get lost trying to follow meandering, splitting logic. Try editing this sentence to remove the red, right? If you read that out loud, you can hear that it sounds ridiculous. It's too long, right? If you have to hold your breath to read one sentence, it's too long, right? So obviously, for example, the first sentence is way too long, right? You can obviously just split it right here. Oh, so notice the difference when I read here. Without splitting the sentence, you would read it as, the app highlights lengthy, complex sentences and common errors. If you see a yellow sentence, shorten or split it. Compare that to if you had split the sentence like this. Right? Again, a period is a pause when you speak, right? So I would read this one as the app highlights lengthy, complex sentences and common errors. Pause. If you see a yellow sentence, shorten or split it. Pause. Right? You see, it sounds so much nicer, and I actually have room to breathe. I don't feel like I'm rushing through the reading. Right? So the way you write your sentences actually guide the way the reader will approach your writing as well. Right? So you don't want your sentence structure to be unnatural. Right? And the easiest way to do that is to follow the recommendation from this University of Arizona. right? Writing guy. The way to do that, the first one to make your writing sound fluid is to vary the sentence, right? The structure of your sentence. One of the problems that I have seen is that, for example, I would say, hey, why don't you write an essay introducing yourself a little bit, student, right? And I would get some shit like this. Right? I would get some shit like this. Yeah. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, right? That would be my question. A student would say something along the line of, oh, I was born in 1985. I came from Hadyai. I am now a lecturer at a university. I like running. I am currently working on a Friday afternoon. Is that grammatically wrong? No. Grammatically, everything is perfect, right? Because it's a simple structure. Grammatically, everything is correct, but it's boring as fuck, right? So if this was somebody speaking, you read it out loud, it would go something like, I was born in 1985. I came from Hadyai. I am now a lecturer at a university. I like running. I am currently working on a Friday afternoon. You sound like a robot, right? Nobody says it that way. Nobody says it that way. Okay. So the first recommendation for improving your fluidity is to do this, right? Varied the structure of the sentences that you use. Here are some example, right? So you could say this. When he went to college, Vlad had good grades, but he was very unhappy. Or you could say Vlad went to college where he earned good grades, but was very unhappy. Or the third way, Vlad went to college. His grades were good, but he was very unhappy. Right? So you see that there are varieties in the sentence structures that you can use. Okay, so let's go back to my robotic example that we had, that I obviously put some here. So instead of being this robotic, right, you don't want to be robotic about it. You could say, for example, you could start the same way. I was born in 1985. When I was young, I lived in Hadyai. Currently, I am a lecturer at a university. In my free time, running has been my passion. Even though it's a Friday afternoon, I am still working. And you can notice the difference immediately between the two. Whereas the first example is very robotic about it, the second example not only is less robotic, more fluid, but it also has more information, right? So I was born in 1985. When I was young, I lived in Hadyai. Currently, I am a lecturer at a university. In my free time, running has been passion. Even though it's a Friday afternoon, I am still working, right? So you notice the difference immediately of the variety in the sentence structures. Right? So that's one quick way to improve the fluidity of your writing, so the reader doesn't get bored out of their mind. Right? The second way is what we call parallelism. Right? Whenever you write something and it's a list of things, make sure they are parallel. Right? What they mean is that you need to use the same tenses everywhere. If you want to put it together, you need to use the same articles and the same type of words everywhere if you want to write together. So let's just look at examples. It would be more clear. Okay, so for example, this first one, it says, speaking in public is sometimes harder than speaking on the phone. Right? Speaking in public is sometimes harder than speaking on the phone. Or you could say Donna Joe was asked to write, to answer phones, and to attend meetings. Right? So what's the parallelism here? So notice that it used the word to write, to answers, and to attend. Okay? Let's copy this sentence and let me show you the bad way of doing it. So the bad way of doing it would be doing it like this, right? So from this sentence, Donna Joe was asked to write, to answer phones, and to attend meetings. I've seen students who does this. Donna Joe was asked to write, answering phones, and attending meetings. If you read this one out loud, you get Donna Joe was asked to write, answering phones, and attending meetings. Right? Which doesn't really make sense compared to Donna Joe was asked to write, to answer phones, and to attend meetings. Right? This gives you a list. This structure is parallel. The easiest way to see it is to make it into a bullet point. Right? Anytime you have a list, make it into a bullet point, and it should be the same structure. So you could do this. Oh, right? So to write, to answer phones, to attend meetings. Right? If you do the same for the second sentence, you see that this one will jump out because it's not the same structure. Right? This is a good tip to use as well when you write your resume for job application. Right? So I have seen a resume of someone along the line of he was a research assistant. He would say something along the line of like plan research project, calculate a model, and then school volunteering, and then computer software. And then I would be like, what are you trying to say? Because this first one, plan, to plan, is a verb, right? The second one, to calculate, is a verb. The third one, school volunteering, that's a noun. The fourth one, computer software, that's a noun. That's a no-no in resume writing, right? Because it's not parallel. So be mindful of your parallelism when you do your writing, right? If it comes together and you write it together, it has to be parallel. Otherwise, it sounds just kind of weird. All right. And the last one is tying ideas together. I would leave you to read the examples that they give, but the concept is actually pretty simple. Right, tying ideas together, I usually call it one old info, one new info. Right, one old info, one new info. So in a sentence, right, in a sentence, you present one older information and then you present one new information. How does this work? For example, you could say the study area of this research is in Indonesia. That's the first sentence of your writing. In the second sentence, you could say the area consists of 5,000 acres. So notice the second sentence. The second sentence says the area consists of 5,000 acres. If I just isolate the second sentence, right, by itself, and you just see the second sentence without the first sentence, you would go which area? Right? You would go which area? Because you don't have the old information. So if you put it together, then you have the area to represent that didn't work. The area to represent the study area of this research, right? So you pull in one old information and then you introduce one new information, which is that it has 5,000 acres of space, right? So one old info, one new info. And if you keep doing it this way, then you see that the sentences string along together, and it provides better understanding for the reader. Right? Any questions for any of you? You feel free to type it out anytime you like. All right. We here all afternoon. Okay. Another tool that I really love when it comes to both precision and fluidity is this tool called Hemingway App, right? Which I showed you just now, right? To access this tool, the link is in the video description. It's totally free. What does this app do? So you basically can just throw any writing into the app, and it will show you the sentences that might need more work. Right? They will show you the sentences that might need more work to correct because it doesn't sound right, it's too long or too complicated or whatever. Right? So for example, let's look at this one. Right? This is the same example from the plain language movement, right? This one, right? We must receive your completed application form, blah, blah, blah. You throw that into Hemingway app, it gives you this long red line saying, I don't know what the fuck you're saying in this sentence. Sorry, pardon my language. I swear a lot, I warn you, whatever. So this app will say, hey, I don't know what you're trying to say in this sentence because your sentence is too complicated, right? So you just label the whole sentence and just say, hey, I don't understand this. What are you trying to say? Right? So that's the first clue to tell you that your writing is probably not fluid. Okay. The second clue that it tells you is this thing called readability. Right? Readability is how hard it is to read your English. This has nothing to do with your content, right? If you put in your research paper, the readability has nothing to do with your scientific content or research content, academic content. It has everything to do with how good your English writing is, right? And this one give you grade 14, and then you go, oh my God, I got grade 14. Higher, like a bigger number is better, right? Because you get more grade, you get better grade. No, actually not. So this grade basically tells you the level of English language that the reader needs in order to understand your writing. Right? So if we say, for example, grade 14, so you know the like K to 12 school life, right? So K to 12 mean K is kindergarten, and then 1 is like in Thai would be Anuban 1, right? And then you go 2 would be Anuban 2. So that first grade, second grade, third grade. And then you go all the way up to 12th grade, right? That's your high school. In Thai, that would be Moho, right? So grade 12 reading means that your reader needs to be at least a high school student in order to understand your writing, right? And then after grade 12, you go into grade 13 and 14. So 14 means your reader needs to be in second year in college or university as a native speaker in order for them to understand your writing. Let me say that again. Grade 14 writing means you need a second year college student native speaker to understand your writing, right? Which is obviously the case here because this writing is an abomination, right? This writing is crazily hard, okay? So bigger grade is not good. You want lower grade, right? So Hemingway App suggests that you aim for grade 9. So grade 9 would be Mosam in Thailand, okay? Why is it aiming so low, right? So again, the goal of writing is to communicate your idea, right? The goal of writing is to communicate your research, communicate your thinking, communicate whatever you are trying to say. You don't want language to be a wall preventing your reader from understanding what you're trying to say. So the higher the grade numbers, the more of the audience you exclude from being able to read your writing, right? So you want your English level to be low, but your content, right, whatever you're trying to say, that has to be peak quality, right? So Hemingway app doesn't check for the quality of your content, it checks for the quality or the difficulty of your English. So again, easy English, better content, right? That's the way to communicate to reader, not like super difficult English and no content, right? I just didn't make this research, so I will just make English hard. Right? Don't do that. That's not a good way to do. Easy English, really good content. So that's what Hemingway app can help you with. Let me show you another example from one of my students' paper. Right? So this one is from geomorphometric application. Right? So this is a whole paragraph from a paper, and you can just put your whole paper into Hemingway app as well. So you see that the entire paragraph, even though it used some big words like geomorphometric, volcanic landform, dynamic processes, but the entire paragraph, only 2 sentences are labeled in red, right? I'm not trying to say don't get any sentences labeled at all, right? It's almost impossible to do that, but try to make it as easy as possible. So you see that the readability of this sentence, of this paragraph, is grade 12, right? For academic paper, it's probably reasonable to aim for 10, 11, 12 instead of 9, right? 9 would be probably too easy for a research paper. But if you get it all the way up to 13 and 14, you are using language that is too hard for your reader. Right? I have the habit of doing the same thing. If I write without thinking, my writing grade would be like 14 or 15 at the start before I do the editing, right? So it depends on where you are and the nature of your writing. Some of you will start at like 8 or 9 and then you can work your way up. But I start like 14, 15 and work my way down. There's no wrong answer, right? But you want to balance between English that is too hard or English that is too simple, you can't express anything. So an academic paper and conference paper, I would say 10, 11, or 12 is probably fine, right? If you can get it down to 9, that's even better, okay? So again, Hemingway app, I use it all the time because it's really helpful. Okay, so that is the precision part, the fluidity part of your writing. Right? You want your writing to be easy to read, not just to you, but to the reader as well. And lastly, intonation. Right. So again, all the links are in the video description. Right. So this one is from the Monash University. Monash. So they talk about academic language. Right. So they talk about what an academic English language is. So they said, academic language is formal, objective, and impersonal. So formal, just as you suspect, right? Having a formal language means that you can't just, even though I said write it the way you speak it, but you have different levels of speaking, right? Even me, I swear all the time, I curse all the time, even on online video. But when I have to be proper in like a big ceremony with seniors and esteemed people in society, I don't use this language, right? I tone down my language. So that's my formal language, right? So when you write, you want to imagine talking to someone you respect. Maybe it's your advisor, maybe it's your, I don't know, grandparents, maybe it's your teachers. That's the language you want to use, right? Or if you want, talk to the president or the prime minister of some countries. Like you are trying to express, tell him or her your idea using that level of English, right? So notice that formal English doesn't mean difficult English. You can use a formal level of writing, yet still having or using easy words, right? Formal English is not big words. It's not the same. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one for the intonation, as far as academic writing goes, is to be objective, right? So this is the part that I talk when George Orwell talk about do not, if you can cut out a word, cut out a word, right? So when you say something like this study is incredibly important, or like this study is very important, right? That is you not being objective, because instead of just saying it is important, you are saying it is very important. So you are comparing it to other subjects in the area, right? So you put in your subjective emotions, you put in your opinions, right? So that's not the level of English that you want. That's not the kind of language that you want to use in academic writing. Uh, that's why you have never seen any research paper saying something along the line of, I think this works. Because that would not be objective. You don't just say, I think this vaccine works because I totally believe in my study. That's not the kind of English that you can use in academic setting, unfortunately. You would probably hear something along the line of, considering the statistical evidence that we have found, we believe that this vaccine is effective in reducing the number of cases. Right? Notice that sentence. Considering the statistical evidence that we have seen, the vaccine is effective in reducing the number of cases. Right? The vaccine is effective in reducing the number of cases. So to anyone that has emotion at all, that sounds like the vaccine should work. Right? The vaccine reduces the number of cases. But as far as academic writing goes, the intonation of an academia is not to have any subjective emotion. You don't just go out and say vaccine works. You said vaccine is effective in doing something. And whether the vaccine works or not, that's up to the reader to make that judgment, right? Not for you. You're just here to present evidence, right? So that's research and academic writing. And then lastly, academic writing is impersonal, right? Impersonal. So that's why when you read research paper, you notice that they typically use the word we, right? Our study did this. We measured this sample. We took this sample. Even though sometimes it's like one author on the paper, right? Because say using the word we make it sound less personal. Like I am not invested in this research. We as a scientific community belongs in this together, kind of thing, right? So it just does it change the meaning of the communication? No, it doesn't. But it's the way that people speak in academia, I guess, right? So if you want to be in a group, you have to speak like a group, right? When you're in Rome, do what the Romans do. Right? If you want to do academic writing, you kind of unfortunately have to use the kind of language that they use in order for people to talk to you. Right? So let me show you some example. Right? And this is the reason why I said using passive voice in academic writing is actually not too bad. People use it all the time. Right? For example, the first sentence says, we administered the questionnaire. Right? Notice that this has the word we in it, which is acceptable, but it is better if you don't have any personal pronouns in there at all. So you could just say with a passive voice, the questionnaire was administered. Right? If you do it that way, then there's no person in it at all, right? But if you can't do that, for example, you want to say, I discovered that something, right? You can say, we can see that, or even better, you can just change the subject so that it doesn't have any personal pronoun in it at all. Right? So that's the kind of intonation that you want to use in academic writing. Right? Unfortunately, the intonation of academic writing is not something that you can learn somewhere. It's something that you have to expose yourself to a lot of research papers, right? You just have to read a lot of research papers and try to imitate the style and the word choices of the others that you are reading, right? Just so go read papers and like, oh, this is the way they say, this is the way they talk about this topic, right? Use the same structure, use the same emotions, use the same intonation in your own writing. And that's how I practice writing in academic settings. Okay, so to summarize what we have talked about today, so we discussed how to improve your precision. Right? So to improve your precision, again, do not use big words, use easy words, use the kind of English that you normally use. And then second, go read George Orwell's suggestions, right? All 6 of them, and do that all the time. I do that all the time, right? And then fluidity, make sure you read what you write, right? Read what you write and make sure it sounds correct. If you find anything that sounds funny, that's probably a good reason to change it, right? So read it out, and then Hemingway app really helps you out, right? It will show you which of your sentences might not be too good, so it's so you can change it during the editing of your paper. And then lastly, for the intonation, especially for academic writing, you want it to be formal, impersonal, and objective, right? And the only way to practice the intonation of academic writing is to read a lot of research papers and try to imitate their voices, their structures, their word choices, and how they approach communication. Right? All of this, if it's too much for you to remember, think of it this way. Every time you write, it's not your writing that matters. Every time you write, it's the content that you want to communicate that matters, right? Your goal is to get rid of everything that stands between you delivering your content and your reader, right? If the English language is too hard, remove it. If the emotion is too much when it comes to academic research, remove it. Remove everything. Leave just your content that you want to deliver to your reader, right? That's your only goal. The goal of writing, again, is to communicate, not to impress your reader with your big words, okay? So that's what I will leave you with. And again, so today is part 1, day 10. Next week, it will be part 1, day 11. And we will talk about how to approach your standardized test. So IELTS, TOEIC, TOEFL, when it comes to the writing part, right? And then we will wrap up part 1 of GSD and move on to part 2. I don't see any questions from the audience, so I guess there's no question today. But remember, you can't just listen to me and do nothing. You will not get better. You need to practice. You need to practice hard, okay? Notice the simplicity of that language here. You need to practice hard all the time, okay? So I'll leave you with that, and thank you for joining me. I will see you again next Friday for part 1, day 11, writing skills in standardized tests. See ya. Thank you.